On July 29th, 2019, a Reddit user going by Iceman30123 posted a story that quickly spiraled into one of those threads where nobody could tell if they were witnessing something real or something carefully constructed to feel real. The post appeared in the Too Afraid to Ask subreddit and described a situation that sounded almost too strange to exist in reality. 12 mysterious and identical stores open on my street. What could be happening? I live just outside a big city in what resembles a suburban main street. Like many suburban main streets, retail business has been rough and they've all closed down. After a month of nothingness, suddenly 12, yes, a dozen, identical convenience stores pop up. They look the same. They aim for the same floor plan. They sell the same products at the same prices. The names are all tiny variations off of each other, like Town Name Mart or Market of Town Name. And all clearly bought their signs from the same place as the fonts, colours, size and shapes are identical. These stores see no business that I've ever witnessed, yet have large staff numbers and are surviving way longer than the former stores that closed on this street. When I enter one, they all stare at me when I shop. I don't usually get nervous, but it feels like they're staring threateningly rather than intently. They only accept cash, unless you pay some $50. Most of their products are Walmart brand, great value products being resold for higher prices. Most of the products are expired food products. I bought bread from one without checking because I was in a rush, and it turned out it was 2 months expired. Upon returning to show them, I found that the entire shelf was expired foods. What was even grosser was a dairy cooler which had ancient milk products. I'm so confused. I feel like I'm in an episode of The Twilight Zone. What's probably happening here? As the post gained traction, other users began trying to make sense of what was happening. Some asked for photos, while others immediately warned against it, suggesting that if the situation involves something illegal, documenting it could be dangerous. Theories started forming quickly. One of the most common explanations was money laundering. The idea was that the stores didn't need real customers because their purpose wasn't to generate legitimate business. It was to move money through a system that looked just legitimate enough on the surface. Others suggested something darker, like human trafficking operations using the stores as fronts, pointing to the unusually high number of employees and the lack of normal customer activity. Some speculated about drug distribution networks, while others proposed tax shelter schemes, where multiple failing businesses could be used to write off losses. One user even shared a personal story. 1000% money laundering. We had a pizza place on my block that was always open but never sold any products. One time, shortly after I moved here, I walked in and asked for the slice, and the guy at the counter stared at me, looking confused, then walked into the back. He came back out with, I'm pretty sure, a slice of pizza from the Domino's next door that had been reheated in a microwave. He just slid it over to me and said nothing, so I had to ask for a price. Again, he looked genuinely confused and was just like, $4? Apparently, everyone in the neighborhood knew what was up, so the guy didn't understand why someone was there looking for pizza. This reinforced the idea that businesses like this can exist purely as a cover. As the discussion continued, the original poster remained somewhat active, but their responses were vague. They avoided sharing specific details about the location, which only added to the skepticism. At one point, they mentioned that the area was largely a retirement community with an unusually older population, and that they didn't have many people locally to discuss the situation with. They also admitted that when they had shown the stores to friends, the reaction was similar: confusion and disbelief. But the moment passed without much investigation. Over time, the tone of the thread began to shift. Without photos, a confirmed location, or any verifiable details, more and more users started to question whether the story was real at all. Some pointed out that the account was a throwaway, which made it easier to fabricate a story without accountability. Others noted that the entire situation sounded more like a fictional setup than a real-world scenario. Requests for proof went unanswered. Then, after a few days, the user stopped replying altogether. No updates, no clarifications, no closure. The account went silent and the thread was left unfinished. To this day, there's no confirmation of what those stores were or if they ever existed at all. It could have been an exaggerated story, a creative writing exercise, or a misunderstanding of something more ordinary. But the details, as described, create a scenario that feels just plausible enough to stay in the back of your mind. Because if even a fraction of it were true, it raises a question that's hard to ignore. What kind of operation needs 12 identical empty stores and doesn't care if anyone notices? On January 27th, 2020, a post appeared on the Am I the Arsehole subreddit asking, "Am I the arsehole for banning my husband and father-in-law from the delivery room due to their intensely stressful and creepy behavior during my pregnancy?" A lot of context the character limit cuts off, but here's the gist. My husband and I are expecting our first child, which I knew would be a really sensitive issue, as his own mother died in childbirth with him. We met with a marriage counsellor to talk things through at the beginning, and he swears he's been seeing his own therapist twice a month throughout my pregnancy. I don't want to call him a liar, but I'm fairly sure he's either not going or not talking about the big issue. He and his father, a hugely active part of our lives, are completely convinced that I'm going to die in childbirth. They won't openly admit it, but their behavior has reached the point where it's constantly making me feel stressed and uncomfortable. When it was husband saying, "Please make sure your life insurance is up to date," and "I'd like you to meet with a lawyer and draft a will," I was like, that's kind of intense, but okay, if that makes you feel better. When husband asked me to go through all of my possessions and inventory what I wanted to be saved for the baby versus what I would want to be returned to my family in the event of my death, I put my foot down and said absolutely not. Too morbid. No way. My father-in-law, who lives a few blocks away and eats dinner with us 2 to 4 nights a week, got on my case about how I was making things difficult for my husband in the event that he will be a grieving widower with a newborn. I'm just going to add here that I've had a completely complication-free pregnancy and have no reason to think I will die screaming in the coming weeks. When I tell my husband this, he calls me paranoid, but I feel like my father-in-law wants me to die. His whole life identity for the past 35 years has been amazing single dad. Never dated or had close friends or even hobbies really. And it seems like he's looking forward to being able to guide my husband through what he went through. At this point, I'd honestly be happy to never see my father-in-law again, and I certainly don't want him in the delivery room, especially since he told me he was putting his foot down about me not being allowed to have an epidural or laughing gas. He's a commanding presence, and I know that whatever he wants in the delivery room, he will get. I know people will say, "Oh, L&D nurses would never let that happen." But you haven't met this man. My husband, in addition to backing his dad on everything, acts like my due date is my death date and has completely pulled away from me. Every minute with him is morbid, stressful, and a reminder that our marriage seems to be crumbling. No matter how many times I tell him his behavior makes me stressed and upset, it's just getting worse, and I do not want it around me while I'm concentrating on giving birth. Do I owe it to my husband to let him stress and upset me during labor? Is his presence at the birth more important than a safe and healthy delivery? My therapist says no, but this whole thing has been so weird, I feel like I need some outside perspective. A user commented saying, "You've got to try to be a bit more sympathetic, and I bet enveloping them in love and reassurance would go a hell of a lot further in calming their overreactions than butting against it." And the OP replied, "I just feel like I've been as understanding as possible. I scheduled marriage counselling to talk through things when I got pregnant. Wanted to keep going, but husband insisted he needed to work through things alone, with his own therapist. And I didn't want to push the issue. I honestly don't know if I could be more sensitive without ramping up my own stress level. I caved and did the terminally ill parent recording videos for after their death thing. The issue that was the big impetus for me making this post was my father-in-law swinging by the house to help me pack up all my non-maternity clothes and take them to our storage unit. I was like, what the hell, no, I'll need those soon. I'm active and healthy and relatively close to my pre-pregnancy size. He called me insensitive for not making things as easy as possible on my husband. Husband came home, saw that my clothes were still in the closet, and got upset with me because we need to be prepared. Genuinely, am I being insensitive here? For refusing to take part in the plans for my own death? Should I be supporting my husband by playing along? He won't discuss the stress/PTSD thing with me because he says he's working through it with his therapist and won't talk about anything they discuss. Is there anything I'm not seeing here? Things I can do to support my husband that don't involve me actively planning to die screaming from a preventable hemorrhage. And that was the last ever that we would ever hear from OP. She replied the same day she made the post and never appeared on the site ever again. No one knows if anything happened to her or not, or if the family continued normally after the childbirth. Perhaps that is a part that makes this whole thing the most disturbing. On July 31st, 2020, a post appeared on the subreddit RBI, where people mostly gets together to solve crimes. The post read, "On Wednesday, July 22nd, a co-worker of mine abruptly up and left work before the end of his shift and hasn't been seen since. 1 week later, a text message is received from him containing only these 3 photos. Does anybody recognize the locations shown in these photos. I work at a lab that makes prescription eyeglasses in Northern Ohio. Last week Wednesday, about 6 hours into our 10-hour shift, around 7:10 p.m, a co-worker of mine got up from his station in a hurry, left his bag with personal belongings at his desk, iPad, Bluetooth headphones, a prescription, phone charger, a book, and a couple other knickknacks, and walked out the door and didn't return. No one's seen him since. Some of my other co-workers thought he was just sick of the long hours and decided to quit. But that just doesn't make sense, why he'd leave behind his personal belongings and not say anything. We tried calling him that same night, but his phone would just ring until it went to voicemail. And by the next morning, his phone was turned off. My boss said he got a hold of his mum and that she hasn't seen or heard from him, but didn't seem too concerned, as she said he had a history of living somewhat of a nomadic lifestyle in his past. She thinks he may have relapsed and owed someone money or just ran off with some girl. Apparently, they aren't very close and don't have the best relationship. I know he had a history of drug abuse, but from everything I've gathered in the 2 years that I've worked with him, he cleaned his life up after an arrest in 2014 or 2015 for drug possession and had been clean since. He always acted normal around me and seemed to be living a productive life. On the subject of the pictures, a couple days ago after work, I received a group text message that was sent to me, 2 of my other co-workers, and 6 other numbers I don't recognize. It was from him and contained the 3 pictures I linked. No text. I tried calling and it rang once, then went to voicemail. When I called again, it went straight to voicemail. This whole thing has me feeling very uneasy, and I don't know what to think. Does anybody here recognize the location of where these photos might have been taken? OP then provides a link with those 3 images. The first image shared appears to show the back of a shed, likely taken in a narrow alleyway, with a noticeably distinct building in the background that resembles a church. The second image is much simpler, showing a plain concrete sidewalk, marked with an X graffiti in one corner. The final photo looks like an empty parking lot, possibly belonging to a shopping centre. Despite the post gaining significant attention, no one was able to accurately identify the exact location where these photos were taken. Almost 4 months later, on November 29th, 2020, OP makes an update on the post. I posted here back in July about a co-worker who up and left during his shift, leaving behind several personal items and not telling anyone where he was going. The next day, me and several other people received a text message from him containing 3 blurry pics of an unknown location. I received several good recommendations on what to do, and ultimately the thread was closed by the mods. I wish I could say we found him, or at least close up any loose ends, but I can't. Shortly after the thread was closed by the mods, a police report was indeed filed. However, in mid-September, I was one of several people that were laid off from the lab we were working at. So if there were any updates on his case after that time, I'm not aware of them. I've done several searches of his name since I left the company to see if any media outlets reported on him, but I personally haven't been able to find anything. Understandably, many people were suspect of my story, and I get that. But I assure you, I've not made anything up, nor have I exaggerated details. I got some slack in the original post for not filing a police report. I realise now that even though nobody else was willing to, I should have stepped up and done it myself. At the time, my perspective was that because I don't know this guy on a personal level outside of work, it really should be up to someone closer to him to do that. But rest assured, a report was filed. Many people are claiming this one might be a hoax or ARG, since no concrete evidence was provided. One user claimed, "I found a comment where it appeared he forgot to switch accounts, and he was pretending to be a random commenter, saying that the photos looked like they were taken at his creepy neighbour's house, who owns a lot of wooded area in New York." It was posted by OP though, so it looks like he messed up trying to add to his made-up Reddit mystery and deleted everything out of embarrassment. The user uploaded this screenshot, which does look like it adds to the story, and was made by the original poster. They might have forgotten to switch account, like the commenter said. Anyway, that's the end of the video. Check out my Patreon if you want to support the channel. Like and subscribe if you would like to see more of these. And as always, good night.